pessoal, bem-vindos a esse vídeo que é um dos vídeos mais importantes que eu já fiz nesses 20 anos de trabalho diretamente aqui do Congresso de Terapia de Casal e Família Sistêmica americano, um dos mais importantes do mundo, se não o mais importante nessa área de terapia de casal e de família, terapia sistêmica raiz que nós temos no mundo inteiro. E então, para quem não me conhece ainda, eu trabalho há 20 anos com psicologia, com casais, com famílias e com abordagem sistêmica e também organizacional, ajudando famílias, casais e empreendedores a conseguirem viver melhor as suas vidas, tomarem melhores decisões através da inteligência emocional baseada em saúde mental, em psicologia, em terapia sistêmica familiar. E há alguns anos eu venho falando e estudando as constelações sistêmicas e pesquisando sobre esse assunto, encontrando muitos e muitos gaps, muitas lacunas com relação ao estudo e especialmente sobre a propagação deste assunto no mundo. Quem é meu aluno sabe que há muitos anos eu tenho uma busca por conseguir entrevistar, conversar com alguém que tenha realmente participado da história, da criação da terapia sistêmica familiar, que nasceu na década de 50 aqui nos Estados Unidos, especialmente na região de Palo Alto, com algumas vertentes pelo mundo que são estudadas até hoje. E então, lá pela década de 90, um teólogo frequentou um workshop e resolveu compartilhar essa abordagem com o mundo, mas sem baseamento na terapia sistêmica, que é uma área extremamente complexa. Como vocês podem ver aqui, é um congresso que reúne milhares de pessoas do mundo inteiro, pessoas da área acadêmica, dedicam a vida dentro das universidades e a campo, fazendo pesquisas, estudando e trazendo atualizações para pessoas como eu, para pessoas como você, que talvez venham ou não da área acadêmica, mas que se importam e se interessam por trabalhos que realmente são baseados em evidências, são baseados em saúde mental e que, por que não, também que trazem para a gente o autoconhecimento, não apenas a parte científica, mas que tenham realmente alguma base. Eis que foi assim, por esses questionamentos, por essas dúvidas, que eu, entusiasta de constelação sistêmica familiar e organizacional, desde 2002, quando conheci essa abordagem, escrevi o livro Conexões Invisíveis, publicado no Brasil e internacionalmente. Por isso eu sempre trago as fontes, os professores, os lugares de onde eu busco essas referências, os lugares onde eu invisto absolutamente tempo, dinheiro e energia para poder trazer o melhor aqui para vocês, já que isso faz parte da minha vida, estudar, compartilhar e trabalhar com as pessoas. E por que não, sim, compartilhar isso com você que está me assistindo. Há alguns anos eu falo. Além das coisas que eu trouxe, né, a fundamentação, o link da constelação com a sistêmica familiar, onde que essas duas áreas se desconectaram, apesar de a terapia sistêmica ter originado as constelações, mas ela ter criado um outro braço, que às vezes as pessoas enxergam de fora quase como uma seita, e não é para menos, né? Órgãos regulamentadores aí de categorias profissionais no Brasil têm proibido essa abordagem legitimamente por conta das denúncias, por conta das reclamações sobre, afinal de contas, o que é esse negócio de constelação. E eu também, apesar de entusiasta dessa área de trabalho, de uns anos para cá tenho me decepcionado muito com o que tem virado este mercado, esta grande confusão de palavras, ideias, quase como se fosse uma seita. E então, sempre entusiasta desse trabalho, buscando trazer as suas bases dentro da terapia sistêmica de raiz. Eis que neste congresso, gente, já desacreditada de encontrar alguém ainda vivo que pudesse me explicar sobre a história, como ela aconteceu, como ela surgiu, quem foram os criadores dessa abordagem. Ontem, aqui nesse congresso, ao participar como aluna de uma palestra de esculturas familiares, que para os estudiosos de constelação, realmente estudiosos de terapia sistêmica, sabem que foi o primeiro nome que veio andando até chegar em constelação sistêmica. Imaginei que eu fosse ter aula com os bisnetos de quem criou então este nome, que eu fosse ter alguma resposta. E eis, gente, que estava lá dando aula, a Judith. A Judith é o elo perdido das constelações. E ela, carinhosamente, obviamente, sem nunca ter me visto, não fazia a menor ideia de que eu também estudo esse trabalho desde o começo, quando ele chegou lá no Brasil, me entregou lá um convite para que eu fosse representante dentro do trabalho dela de escultura familiar. Eu prontamente aceitei com um sorriso de orelha a orelha no rosto. Imagina o que eu estava vendo ali, a história na minha frente, podendo participar disso e ainda ser convidada, como vários outros colegas foram convidados para participar daquele estudo de caso que ela estava ali reproduzindo para a gente a partir da técnica que ela criou. Assisti inebriada a toda a aula e ao final, evidentemente que eu sabia, que ela sabia que as constelações existem e tornaram este vulto, fui respeitosamente perguntar para ela: senhora Judith, o que a senhora pensa sobre o senhor Bert Hellinger? Ela é psiquiatra com várias titulações na área de saúde mental. E este homem foi para quem eu dei aula muitas vezes, inclusive o trabalho nas tribos africanas, que é a região onde ela nasceu e onde ela foi criada, junto com outros 20 irmãos, mais ou menos, se não me engano, não de sangue, que faziam parte de uma comunidade onde ela era a irmã mais velha. E de onde ela introduziu na terapia sistêmica familiar toda aquela parte dita espiritual das constelações praticadas na sua família de origem. E ela trouxe isso para dentro do campo científico. E escreveu inúmeros artigos e trabalha até hoje como consultora de várias instituições no mundo inteiro que a consultam para resolver traumas complexos nas famílias multiculturais. São eles drogas, alcoolismo, violência, tudo que a gente pode imaginar de mais complexo do que pode existir num grupo humano é o objeto de pesquisa da Judith. E esse é o trabalho e a contribuição dela para o mundo. A partir de hoje, está encerrada a minha busca por entrevistar quem foi que ensinou o Bert Hellinger. Então, a Judith, muito diplomática, concedeu esse vídeo para falar de legado, para falar de consistência, credibilidade, discernimento, pesquisa, registro, e de muitas pessoas que vem construindo saúde mental, fazendo parte de eventos como esses, que eu te convido a fazer parte hoje também, através desse vídeo, quem sabe, um dia, pessoalmente. Se você tiver alguma coisa para contribuir na sua comunidade, no seu trabalho, para os seus colegas, então eu te convido a ouvir a senhora Judith e a aprender um pouco sobre o que é a terapia sistêmica nas suas bases, nas suas origens. How the systemic fields entered in your life, or you created the systemic fields?
So I was the first family therapist in South Africa, and I developed transitional family therapy. Well, I developed my way of working.
When it was?
Well, really, it started in 1950. 1960.
Yeah, when the things were going on here in the US?
There were it was during the 50s and the 60s when things were just beginning here in the States and in England, and Italy was a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't make sense to me to work with one person. So when I was a medical student, I learned that I walked into, well, let me back up. As a medical student, we were responsible for taking blood pressure and blood and taking the notes on why somebody was in hospital. And I was taking these notes, and this African man, he was 27 years old, and he had one leg missing above the thigh. He had one arm missing, and his other arm he had only from below the waist, below the elbow. The rest was gone. So he had one leg left. And I was supposed to tell him he needs to have that leg amputated because he's got gangrene from smoking and drinking.
Oh.
And the one arm he has left, he's got a metal band around it with space for a beer can and space for a cigarette, and he's still smoking and drinking. And I said to him, you're going to die if we don't cut off your leg. And he said, I don't want to live like a vegetable. How can I live like that? So I said, do you have any family? He said, no. So I asked the social worker to see if she could find any family. And so he's African. He's got to have somewhere that he came from. He wasn't born out of an egg. Got to have a family. So she found his brother living in the city. And I met with his brother and I said, look, I want to save your brother's life. How do I do that? Where are your parents? Who cares about him? And the brother said to me, he was a bad man. He was a tsotsi, a criminal. He smoked, he drank, he stole, and he was thrown out of the tribe because he was a bad man. So I said, well, he's going to die if he has nowhere to go, and he won't agree to the amputation. So I said to his brother, will you please go to the tribe and ask the chief if he can come, if he has his amputation and he stops smoking and drinking and promises to be good, can he come home? Can he come back to the tribe? And the brother took a week and he came back and he said, the chief says he can come back as long as he makes a promise to have the amputation. And when he told his brother, the brother cried and said he would do it. And he became a very famous storyteller, talking to the children about his story and how important it was to be honest and not drink or smoke. And
so nice.
So I realized that when you're working with families, you can work with one person who isn't the patient to create change in a whole system. So that was link therapy, working through a family or community link to bring about change. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of my model, was you work with as many people as you can get to get the biggest possible story, so you can choose where to work, or you find one person who can connect you if you can't get to them yourself, if you can't speak the language, or if it's an extended family that keeps secrets and doesn't want a stranger. You can still work through one person, or you can work with the whole system. And then I started to meet, I invited people to the first South African Family Therapy Conference, and it was Donald Block from the Ackerman, Carl Whittaker, Maurizio Andolfi, who's now in Italy, and a whole group of people. And they were all working with nuclear families, just the nuclear family. And they were blown away because I did a keynote where I had everybody be part of the tribe, part of the city, and understand how important it is to take a very broad view. So then I met Sal Manouchian, who invited me to come to teach a child guidance, to share my way of working with looking at the entire system as opposed to just the nuclear family. So I started teaching his supervisors how to look at larger systems. And because my background, I was an actor. So for me, a lot of the work I do is the dramatic. So never just a still picture, but an intergenerational picture with everybody moving and experiencing how shift can happen.
So nice. And how it integrates with the Macy's conference here and all the things that are happening here, where you integrate?
So I was well, because I was one of the pioneers. So we would have meetings with Ross and Joan Speck, Sal Manouchian, Bourjameni Naj, Jim Framo, the Italian group, and I was one of the founders. So it was with Kitty LaPerriere and Virginia Satir, and we all traveled the world together doing keynotes and teaching the way we work.
Great.
So I was doing a keynote in at the European Family Therapy Association when Van Hellinger sat in on my keynote talking about what I did today with transitional family sculpting and how you can bring the whole extended family to life and have them come to resolution.
Great. So Judith, please tell me your story as a professional and whatever you like to say about the systemic field.
So I grew up in South Africa, where before and during apartheid and after, and before apartheid, all of my family friends were mixed race, completely mixed belief systems and a lot of different cultures. And before apartheid, the different cultures and ethnicities and countries were all allowed to mix and intermarry. And then suddenly when apartheid happened, the mixed marriages were banned and people were being punished for being with somebody of a different color or ethnicity. And so it was like being in a war zone. People would be disappeared overnight. They'd be thrown into prison. They'd have to escape to another country. And our family friends were all very close, and suddenly, people were being literally disappeared, like Argentina, but not nearly as bad as Argentina. It was a lot of people ran to other countries just to survive. But marriages that were previously legal suddenly were illegal because it was a black and white marriage.
Yeah.
So as the parents were, sometimes you never knew whose parent would be there, whose parent wouldn't. So we were a very close group of families fighting against apartheid, building what we believed was my parents and their friends all believed was the right way to live. So the beginning of the opposition party to apartheid. And I was the oldest of 32 non-blood siblings. So really like an extended family where we always knew, even if our parents were missing, that somebody's parents would be there. So we always felt the safety of connection to community and extended family. So for me, I also grew up with the African belief in UBUNTU, that I am because you are, and we all take care of one another, not just of ourselves. So a collectivist belief system, not an individualist belief system. And so when my father died when I was 6, and this whole extended family was still there to take care of my little brother who was a month old. So I raised him because my mother had to go to work. And there were always people to help, and just that sense of not being completely alone. So when I went to medical school, I always thought in terms not just of family, which is important, but extended family and community as a complete support system. Now, as a little child, my father developed the field of preventive and social medicine because he wanted to make sure that the African children, that the birth rate and survival rate of African children matched that of white children and the rest of the first world instead of the third world. Mm-hmm. And so he developed these community and sort of health and community centers in all of the different ethnic areas, the Indian area, the African areas, and so on. So as a child, I went with him to those clinics and community centers, and he would have nurses and doctors and teachers and agriculturalists because he wanted women to be educated. So there were teachers, and he wanted them to learn about agriculture. So there was there were agriculturalists. So people living in the community who would take care of their health and education and make sure that they knew how to feed babies and how to plow the land. And so as a child, I spent a lot of time in those communities. So I would sit at the feet of the African storyteller with the other children and listen to the intergenerational stories, because in Africa, the history of the tribe is told through story. And it's the storyteller who tells the story. The grandparents are the people who raise the children with love, and the parents do the discipline. So when I was very little, I was told that I was a traditional African healer, because we would sit with the traditional healers and listen to them healing the community and dealing with conflict, because the healer, the spiritual healer, was the one who heard about conflict first. And only if they couldn't help resolve it, did it go to the tribal council for the chief and the council to work on decisions about punishment. So I was sitting as a child in a circle with the Isangoma, the traditional healer, and there were two women having a big battle. The one saying, "You killed my son, you poisoned him," and the other one saying, "I didn't do anything." And so the Isangoma, the traditional healer, is throwing the bones, because they read the bones when patterned, and they throw herbs into the fire. And as she threw the herbs in the fire, I'm seeing this picture, and I'm maybe 5 years old, and I'm shouting out, "No, that's not what happened. I can see it was..." And so she tells me to keep quiet and pushes me back to sit behind her. And, I said, it's just not true. And she could see what I was seeing. So the woman wasn't guilty. And later on we discovered that it was, the child had died of polio, an infectious disease, wasn't poison. But she said to me afterwards, "You are a healer, and this is what your life is." And so when I went to medical school, I always knew that I would always be a healer. And so that's been a huge part of who I am, is blending the Western science with the traditional healing methods.
So nice to hear you. Como você pode perceber, ao longo desse vídeo nós exploramos os caminhos da terapia sistêmica familiar e destacamos a contribuição inestimável de Judith Landau nesse caminho. Apesar de algumas críticas que essa abordagem enfrenta e tem enfrentado nos últimos anos, especialmente no Brasil, ao aprofundar esse conhecimento você descobre que fundamentos científicos sólidos sustentam práticas como a escultura familiar, precursora das constelações familiares. Judith Landau dedicou a sua vida à integração da ciência, espiritualidade e intuição, oferecendo ferramentas valiosas para a pacificação das famílias e comunidades. E esperamos que esse conteúdo inspire novas conexões significativas em sua vida pessoal e profissional. Compartilhe conosco aqui nos comentários. Você já conhecia Judith Landau? E qual é a sua perspectiva sobre a terapia sistêmica familiar? A sua opinião é fundamental para enriquecer esse diálogo com a sua experiência.